What happens when you get one of country's most celebrated artists on a daytime talk show, and she thinks she's coming for light chit-chat, but instead it turns into an instant battleground? It all seemed to be set up to be another celebrity guest spot, where there would be a few jokes, some great stories, and a bit of a promo. But in under a minute, one cutting comment from a panelist sparked an impromptu showdown that no one expected was going to happen live in the studio. The entire room fell silent at the sudden shift in atmosphere as Joy Behar found herself going against a legend who had built decades of their career holding her own. Let's be clear, this was no ordinary celebrity guest appearance, as every moment after this moment would become more and more electric. Everyone settled into the studio, the cameras zoomed in on the smiling faces of the hosts, with Whoopi Goldberg calmly in the middle of it all, Sunny Hostin on the side with her ever-present calm Alyssa Farah Griffin in her element, while Joy's smile indicated she had a few words up her sleeve. The door flew open. Reba McEntire walked into a roar of applause as everyone in the studio fell to their feet for the country star who graced them with her iconic red hair and a warm wave. "Ladies and gentlemen, the queen of country music, Reba McEntire," Joy shouted through her grin. 4 decades of chart-topping music, an iconic voice that had graced many of our playlists for years. You were even just given the Icon Award the other night. Congratulations on that. She smiled sweetly. "Thank you," Reba said, as a slow round of applause started to erupt from the audience as she found herself sitting in her chair. And then Joy asked the question, "Now you've seen the music industry evolve and change. You've been around a very long time. How do you really feel when these musicians are popping up on platforms like TikTok, with basically no musical ability at all? What does that do to your soul when you see them becoming stars overnight?" A wave of silence fell over the entire studio at the blunt question. Whoopi looked surprised as all of her co-hosts stared at Reba, waiting for the response that many were already expecting. Reba smiled patiently before slowly answering with, "Honey, if you think that makes success, then you must not understand that music requires so much talent. If you haven't put in any effort to the industry, then your fame can come and go just like that." Everyone roared with laughter as they felt the burn of the singer's words as Joy tried to salvage her reputation. "Oh, come on. I am just asking. I miss the artists who were writing their own songs, or who were working really hard. They were not just making songs based on how long it took them to upload a video on TikTok, or how to make videos look pretty on Instagram. They were really creating music for the people, for our lives, and we really need more of that, to be honest. Let's try to go back to that, when the music was better, and music was being created from the heart." The room remained quiet for a beat before Reba simply said, "It looks like I missed that you were paying attention to your co-stars when it matters. Why don't we get back to where it really matters here on this show for today, since this has clearly become about who is more famous in the modern world?" Reba's remark was followed by a round of surprised laughter as Whoopi buried her head in her hands and tried to maintain composure as her eyes shot to joy and surprise at the quick jab. "Wow, I thought I could come and just have a peaceful time today, talking about my new music," Reba continued as Joy began to laugh hysterically. "Well, that is really funny, honey, when you cannot really take your ego or your thoughts into the space that someone is providing to be nice to you. So with that said, do you think that perhaps it is possible for you to understand the industry in ways other beers than it used to be when it was actually producing music that was considered great?" The tension mounted in the studio as the energy shifted drastically. Reba's gentle smile faded, replaced with an intensity that commanded the entire space. Her voice lowered, but it carried an unmistakable authority. "Actually, darling," she said, her words as sharp as a new Nashville honeysuckle, "I understand it so well that I can tell when someone is more interested in the spectacle than the substance. You want to know why I'm not on TikTok singing a goofy song? Because my art isn't about chasing fleeting trends. It's about creating something with lasting value. Something that's earned, not given, based on how well you can pout for the camera. Now shall we discuss something truly meaningful, or are you just going to continue trying to generate clickbait at my expense?" Reba beamed, utterly unruffled. "And pretty easy to keep a job," she responded, the coolness in her tone amplified by the stunned silence that followed before the room erupted in applause and laughter. "When controversy is the only thing you're known for." Whoopi let out a laugh, and even Joy's expression betrayed her. Leaning back with a look that hovered between shock and grim determination, Joy grinned again, the laughter of Reba's previous barb just dying down around the studio. "Oh honey, relax," Joy drawled, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. "I'm just saying maybe the country legends are starting to sweat a little. You've been around the block and back, Reba. Shmpsitis a bebe, stop a Reba." An embarrassed snicker rippled through the audience, but Reba remained unflappable, her eyes narrowing just slightly as she met Joy's gaze. A flicker of a smile, more a warning than anything warm, graced her lips. "Overshadowed?" Reba repeated, leaning in a few inches. "Sweetheart, you can't throw shade when you're standing in someone else's spotlight." The room exploded. Gasps turned to murmurs as audience members exchanged incredulous glances. Joy's smile flickered as if surprised by Reba's immediate takedown, but she soldiered on. "You're an incredible singer," Reba Joy admitted, her voice hardening ever so slightly. "But let's be real, the world has changed. The younger generation doesn't need old-school Nashville lessons. They don't care about your history lessons. Music evolves. Nostalgia doesn't keep you on the radio." Reba's smile didn't waver, but her voice dipped, each word now carrying the weight of a laser. "Then why is it that ratings drop every time somebody willing to speak some actual truth sits in that chair?" Another silence fell over the room, thicker and more charged than the last, punctuated by scattered, almost reverent applause and a lone audible wow from the back. Even Whoopi looked a bit uncomfortable, averting her gaze for a split second. Guy's smile faltered completely. "Now you're blaming me for the ratings?" She shot back, her eyes flashing. Reba offered a tiny dismissive shrug. "Not blaming you, Joy. Gauged observing a trend. People at home get tired of watching someone make their career out of cutting other people down." This response hit even harder. The frustrated tension radiating from Joy was palpable. She squared her shoulders, her expression hardening, yet Reba seemed entirely unmoved. "Please," Joy scoffed, a tight laugh escaping her. "I call it honesty. Somebody has to call out all the carefully manicured BS these celebs rehearsed on their way to this show." Reba nodded, a slow, deliberate movement before delivering her next measured shot. "There's a fine line between honesty and meanness, and you seem to have lost your compass. That must be tiring." The studio roared back to life, a wave of laughter, applause, and whistles washing over them. Joy's hand stopped inches from her coffee mug, a look of stunned frustration washing over her features. The first glimpse of any emotion other than feigned amusement. Whoopi scowled. Sunny was speechless, her mouth hanging slightly open. Alyssa jotted down furious notes, her pen a blur as she documented the exchange. Zoe tried to recapture her composure, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, she managed. You've certainly still got the fire in you. Guess some people never grow out of the attitude." Reba tilted her head back, her sweet smile now feeling like a sharpened dagger. "And some people spend their entire lives never growing into one." The atmosphere had become electric, each word loaded with the potential to detonate the entire conversation. Joy leaned forward, her sarcasm now tinged with something icy. "You love to talk about hard work, Reba. It's easy to preach when you've had decades at the top and you're sitting on a mountain of success built by it. How does that feel to someone like you when you look back?" For a moment, Reba's silence was deafening. Then she spoke, her voice a calm undercurrent against the rising tension. "Sweet tu edi I propuntmo. I performed with the crack of pool balls drowning out my voice and arguments obscuring my lyrics. There were nights my paycheck was literally whatever food was left in the kitchen. If you call that being out of touch, then I call it earning every single breath." The audience hung on her every word, hanging on the precipice as Reba continued, her voice never rising yet. Every inflection packed a more potent punch. "You want to talk about staying relevant? I connected with people long before we were calling them fans, long before there were hashtags, before autotune became a crutch, and before publicists began writing every public thought for celebrities. And then the discussion was about to take an even more unexpected turn. You want to know what's kept me going all these years, Joy?" Reba asked, never raising her voice. "It wasn't luck, and it damn sure wasn't an algorithm. It was grit." Joy responded with a smirk and a dismissive hand wave, as if it weren't even worth a consideration. "Oh please, you got rich off of the very system you're complaining about. You ain't rewriting history now 'cause people love a underdog story." She delivered the lines like a finishing blow, but Reba hardly batted an eye. Her eyes narrowed, her face hardening slightly under the hot lights and whirring cameras. "So what you're saying is I turned my suffering into a marketing tool?" Reba replied, her words slow and heavy with intention. "That's a pretty low blow, especially from someone who hasn't made the audience laugh in a while." The collective gasp from the audience was almost audible. Even Whoopi's eyes widened, and she let out a soft, audible "oh damn." Joy's smile instantly vanished. "Excuse me?" she demanded, her tone suddenly sharp. Reba never blinked. "You heard me," she said. "You're the first one to accuse anyone else of playing the victim, but soon as someone calls you on your bad behavior, you're the one crying foul. You're fine dishing out criticism, Joy. Can't take it though." It hit Reba and the audience harder than she could have ever imagined. Joy's face flushed as she flicked a glance to an audience no longer laughing on cue. "So now you think you're better than everybody else 'cause you've sold a few records?" she fired back. "You're just another celeb pretending to be humble 'cause it's a cute look." Reba leaned forward, a hair dropping, her voice to a level that caused everyone in the studio to instinctively lean in. "No, Joy," she said quietly. "I'm genuine 'cause life gave me no other choice. You're loud 'cause silence might just force you to look in the mirror. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Joy opened her mouth, struggling to find a response, a reply that never quite materialized. The silence that hung in the air was thick, awkward, and undeniable. After a moment of heavy silence, Reba sat back, her eyes still locked on Joy's. "Go ahead," she said evenly. "Keep saying that working hard is passé if that's what makes you sleep at night. Just don't forget that while you're out there talking, some of us actually did the building." The applause began, a ripple that grew into a wave that threatened to wash the studio in a sea of sound. Joy's knuckles turned white as she gripped her coffee mug. The smug, confident smile she'd sported all morning was nowhere to be found. Whoopi took the opening like a champ. "All right, ladies," she said, forcing a strained chuckle that barely cut the tension. "Let's take it down a notch before the FCC is calling my cell phone." The audience let out another chuckle, but the undercurrent of unease remained. Joy straightened the papers on her lap, managing a forced smile that looked more like armor plating than genuine confidence. Reba remained eerily still, her hands folded neatly, her gaze fixed on Joy's. It was a silence that hummed with an almost volatile energy. Finally, Joy broke the stillness, her voice deceptively pleasant, but laced with an unmistakable edge. "I'll give you credit," she said. "You've got guts. Not many guests on this couch last through a tough question without melting down." Reba responded instantly, her voice clear and steady. "Fire is what keeps you standing when the cameras are long gone." Her words seemed to hang in the air, simple, sincere, and so potent it was clear she wasn't playing for laughs. A low murmur spread through the audience. Joy kept her composure, though her jaw had tightened once again. Looking to steer the ship back on course, Whoopi consulted her cue cards. "So Reba, your new album? Maybe it's never been about the music," Joy interrupted, tilting her head, a faint smirk returning to her lips. "Maybe you just can't stand that this spotlight belongs to a whole other generation now." Whoopi shot her a warning glance that screamed, "For the love of God, please stop." But the moment had sailed out of reach. Reba turned slowly towards Joy, her expression unreadable. "If you think fame is something you own," she said softly, "then I can see why you're so worked up trying to get it." A collective surge rippled through the audience. Some erupted into laughter, others watched in stunned silence. The line landed with surgical precision. Joy glanced down at her cue cards, clenching them so tightly that they began to buckle. "Cute," she muttered, a smile creaking onto her face, a smile that was anything but convincing. But somehow in that very moment it felt as if the most explosive part of the interview was still waiting to happen. "You always have a comeback ready for everything, don't you?" Joy said, her tone laced with feigned amusement. Reba's eyes, sparkling with an almost detached wisdom, met hers. "Only when people mistake attention for achievement." The tension in the studio held its breath for just a second. Joy leaned back idly, fanning her cue cards as if the past 15 minutes hadn't irrevocably shifted the interview's trajectory. With a practiced smile, she switched tactics. "So Reba," she started her question wrapped in faux inquisitiveness, "you talk so much about artist and craft respect, yet in an interview didn't you refer to modern pop music as plastic?" Her head tilted just a hair, implying the long-awaited opening she'd sought. "A bit judgmental, don't you think?" A low murmur rippled through the audience. Everyone saw the game. This wasn't a question anymore. It was another bid to wrest back control of the conversation from the singer who had been steadily and artfully dominating it. Reba's expression didn't waver. "I critique systems," she stated in the same even tone without a hint of aggression. "I don't critique people. You critique people, and call it entertainment." There wasn't an atom of venom in her voice. It was just a calm, precise, undeniable fact. Joy laughed, a brittle, forced sound. "Touché," she said, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was clear this wasn't the end. Across the table, the other hosts had gone unusually silent. Sunny looked down into her coffee mug. Alyssa had ceased taking notes entirely. Even Whoopi appeared to be silently counting the minutes until the next commercial. And then it happened. In a voice barely audible above the din, Joy muttered, "Queen of country. Queen of contradictions." She clearly expected the remark to be swallowed by the studio buzz. It wasn't. Reba slowly turned her head and raised a single sculpted eyebrow. "Go on and say it louder, Joy," she said, her voice still quiet, measured. "If you're going to throw shade, have the decency to throw it in daylight." The atmosphere in the studio suddenly crackled with palpable tension. A collective gasp escaped the audience. The production crew members even shifted uncomfortably. Joy's mouth tightened for a fraction of a second before she mustered another brittle, painted-on smile. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," she dismissed with a wave of her hand. Reba leaned forward just an inch, maintaining her composed posture. "I'm not taking anything personally," she said, her voice still remarkably calm. "I just prefer those who have the courage to speak their mind rather than whisper it behind a coffee mug." Joy pressed her lips together, her practiced composure beginning to fray at the edges. Whoopi opened her mouth, perhaps to intercede and guide the discussion back, but it was too late. The room felt like it was about to explode, and Joy held the detonator, After an entire interview spent meticulously attempting to dictate the narrative, the frustration finally boiled over. Her hand slammed down on the table with a sharp crack that echoed in the hushed studio. Perhaps the problem isn't the industry at all, she spat out, her voice shaking slightly with anger. Perhaps the problem is artists like you who can't handle being criticized. Another gasp from the audience. The other hosts remained frozen, stunned into silence. Reba didn't flinch. She simply looked at Joy, her expression carrying the same calm patience of someone evaluating the tactical merits of engaging further. Then slowly, deliberately, she stood up from her chair. Silence fell. Every eye in the room was on Reba. You call that criticism? She asked, her voice soft but carrying across the studio. No, honey, that's arrogance wearing an expensive outfit. The words sliced through the air with laser precision. Joy stared, a mixture of disbelief and righteous indignation flashing in her eyes. Reba's voice remained quiet, steady. She didn't need volume to be impactful. With one measured step forward, she radiated an aura of unwavering confidence born from years of silencing the doubters. You've spent decades on that stage, making a spectacle out of other people's lives, she said, never breaking eye contact. You mask your cruelty with the guise of honesty, and the moment someone mirrors that honesty back to you, suddenly they're the emotional one. And just as the dramatic tension seemed to reach its apex, the confrontation was about to take another legendary turn. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Reba wasn't finished. You call people sensitive because it's easier than admitting you're scared, she said with a steady voice. Afraid that one day someone will finally see past the performance. Suddenly the studio felt much smaller. The low hum of the lights overhead and the quiet creak of a camera operator adjusting his position became impossible to ignore. The audience sat in total silence. Finally Joy replied, but the brash confidence she'd carried all morning had disappeared. You think you know me? She asked, her voice softer. You think singing about heartbreak means you know people? Reba's lips twisted into a thin, humorless smile. No, Joy, she said calmly. I know people because I'm brave enough to actually listen to them. Perhaps you could try that in between punchlines. The words boomed in the silence. Joy didn't have an immediate response for the first time that day. Reba stood her ground unmoved. There are lines you don't cross, she said, her voice growing colder. Today you crossed one. An audible gasp rippled through the audience. Joy, trapped and unnerved, stared at Reba, finally responding with a tremulous whisper. Do you think you own pain because you've had to endure it? She asked. Everyone in this industry sacrifices. Reba nodded slowly. Perhaps they do, she conceded. But some people endure their scars quietly, and they still extend compassion. Others parade their wounds as soon as the spotlight begins to fade and pass that off as strength. Joy squared her shoulders, refusing to retreat. You don't know what I've had to go through. Reba's voice dropped so low, the audience strained to hear. Then why are you so quick to mock pain you haven't felt? Joy felt a tremor of something akin to fear. So suffering gives you the right to judge? She challenged, her voice shaking. Everyone here has had to fight for something. Reba's eyes, calm but unwavering, fixed on Joy. Some fights are worth singing about, Joy, she said quietly. Others, you turn into journalism. Another gasp. Joy opened her mouth, closed it again, then stammered, just because you've experienced hardship, it doesn't mean you get to devalue anyone else's. Reba shook her head. It's not about getting to devalue Joy. It's about having lived. It's about knowing that there are some people out there who can turn their pain into a public spectacle, and then there are those who manage to do it with dignity. We're not the same. The air in the studio thickened with tension. Joy swallowed hard. I work hard, she said, her voice laced with frustration. I sacrifice my privacy. Reba smiled faintly. And you sacrifice grace, she responded evenly. You sacrifice the comfort of those you attack with the sharpness of your wit because you can't bear the silence that would fall if you had to face the reality of other people's experiences. Joy's face tightened. You can't just make it sound like my job is trivial because I use my platform to ask questions. You don't ask questions, Reba stated, her tone sharpening again. You make pronouncements, and you hide your own insecurities behind a shield of what you believe is moral outrage. Joy felt herself backing into a corner, a feeling she'd fought her whole life. You have no idea what it's like for me. Reba's gaze softened just a fraction, but her resolve didn't waver. Then perhaps the responsible thing for you to do as a journalist of some repute would be to actually understand before you pass judgment, she said. There's a world of difference between reporting the facts and wielding them like weapons. The first has the power to educate. The second only has the power to destroy. Joy stared at Reba, speechless, defeated in a way she never imagined. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the palpable tension in the air, and the silent understanding passing between the two women that something profound and unscripted had just unfolded before the world. Joy's fingers wrapped tightly around the handle of her coffee mug, but she didn't raise it. The weight sitting in the pit of her chest made even that seemingly simple movement feel as though it would snap her spine. She let out a slow breath, finally looking down for the first time all morning. And with the ensuing silence, the fight in her softened just enough for truth to emerge. "Perhaps I overstepped," she confessed in a hushed tone. Reba remained perfectly still, her gaze serene and unyielding. When she spoke, there was no triumph, no sarcasm, only a quiet assuredness. "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but you were the one who established the boundary." Their eyes met one final time. There was no apology, no agreement, no pat on the back and move on. It was merely a moment of shared understanding between two women who had both realized neither had walked away unscathed. For a few seconds, none of it was about Nielsen ratings, viral video clips, or winning the last word. It was just two women caught in the fallout of their pride, aware that no battle is ever truly won without its scars. Reba reached up and adjusted the tiny microphone clipped to the lapel of her jacket. The small click echoed in the deafening silence of the studio. "Respect isn't something you demand, Joy," she stated with quiet precision. "It's something you give." And with a relaxed demeanor and eyes focused straight ahead, Reba returned to her chair. The cameras rolled on, but no one in the room so much as breathed. Even the live audience seemed to hold their breath, afraid that the slightest sound might shatter the fragile calm that had descended upon the stage. Joy offered a wobbly smile, the practiced kind of expression that professionals employ when the show must continue despite the sting. "I guess we both learned a lesson today," she mused. Reba simply offered a slight nod. Perhaps she allowed, "But lessons don't heal all the bruises." The words hung in the air long after they were uttered, palpable in the tension of the room. Slowly the camera zoomed out, framing both women within the same shot. They were no longer just rivals. They were two immensely powerful women, whose paths had collided in a way neither would soon forget. And then the small red light on the camera winked one last time, and the screen went black. "You thought this was going to be just another celebrity sit-down, didn't you?" Well, it turned into something else entirely. Reba McEntire put on a masterclass in standing her ground for every artist who's been dismissed, while Joy Behar came face to face with the thin line between confidence and arrogance. All live on air. So tell us, who do you think crossed the line? Was Joy too aggressive? Or did Reba's response go too far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more unforgettable showdowns.